Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Politics drive a lot of conversations on this program, including one that we're about to have, Kailey, following a ruling today by the Supreme Court. They've been adding opinion days with a lot of cases left. This one brings us to the bump stock ban.
Yeah, 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court effectively gutting the ban on bump stocks that was put into place during the Trump administration.
That's right.
After the Las Vegas shooting in October of 2017 that killed 60 people, wounded hundreds more, the deadliest mass shooting still in modern American history.
That's right. That's why we're glad to spend some time with Congresswoman Dina Titus, who represents Nevada's 1st District and had a visceral reaction to this ruling earlier. Congresswoman, welcome to Bloomberg TV and radio. We appreciate the time you're giving us today. You tweeted following this ruling, the Supreme Court just gutted a years-long bump stock ban. You call it terrifying, and you end your message with the line, "An angry lawmaker is a motivated one. The fight is far from over." Will you provide a legislative answer to this ruling today?
Well, I already have done that. In fact, I first introduced the bill in 2017, right after the shooting that was in my district, and I've brought it back every session since. It has some bipartisan support, and if it came to the floor, I believe it would pass because the public opinion is so in our favor. We predicted that the Supreme Court would do this from the very minute that the ATF took action. We knew somebody would sue. So the best way to deal with the problem then and now is through legislation.
Well, Congresswoman, as I noted, this did go into effect during the Trump administration. And we know that Donald Trump does have a close relationship with congressional Republicans. We saw that on full display here in Washington yesterday as he met with Republican members of both the Senate and the House, all of whom seem to be, for the most part, behind him. Is it actually Donald Trump who needs convincing here to push for a legislative answer?
Well, I don't have any sway with Donald Trump, and I don't think this is very high on his agenda. And most of the Republicans have been in bed with the NRA for such a long time that they resist this. The ATF under Trump made this ruling to try to circumvent legislation, probably knowing full well that it would be struck down by the courts. We knew it. I don't know why they wouldn't know it. So it was a symbolic gesture, and it's just taken this long to finally have the truth come out. And in the meantime, we've been trying to get that legislation passed so we wouldn't be subject to the ruling of this very conservative and insensitive Supreme Court.
The shooting in Las Vegas, in your district, that brought us to this point of having a bump stock ban is still the largest, the deadliest in modern American history, Congresswoman. What are you hearing from people in your district today?
Well, we've been working with some gun violence advocacy groups. Moms Demand Action is very active in my district. They've put crosses up on the site where the shooting occurred. There's a lot of support. In fact, Nevada legislature passed a bump stock bill. 11 states have done that, as well as the District of Columbia. Those laws won't be affected by this decision because it was narrowly written just on the basis of a technicality. So those will still stand. But that tells you something about how the people in Nevada feel. And Nevada is a Wild West state with a lot of people with guns, but they know these aren't for hunting or for sport. Bump stocks are strictly for killing, and that's what they do.
Well, Congresswoman, that really gets to the heart of the question that was before the court, which is whether a bump stock converts a semi-automatic weapon into a machine gun. The court today ruled that it doesn't. Would your constituents disagree?
Oh, absolutely. And look at the dissenting opinion. Justice Sotomayor says if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck. They looked at some kind of pulling of one finger as opposed to the overall function of the bump stock. You attach it to a gun, it will allow you to fire 400 to 800 rounds in 1 minute. Think of the people you can take out in 1 minute with that many bullets. So it's very clearly a transformation of a regular gun to an automatic gun. Machine guns we outlawed in the 30s.
There will be another Supreme Court decision coming up on whether certain at-risk individuals should be able to apply for a gun license, those who've been involved in domestic abuse. Does this ruling today make you worry about the next?
Well, I worry about everything that comes out of this Supreme Court, frankly. But yes, it does. There's a lot of talk about we need to deal with the mental health problems, keep guns out of the hands of people who can do harm. It's not the gun, it's the person. And yet here's a measure that does just that. We'll see if they strike it down or not. Likely they will, because the NRA uses the argument nose under the tent. Any little thing that we do, they say, attacks your Second Amendment rights. That's absolutely not true. I'm a gun owner. I grew up in the South. Daddy went hunting all the time till had two little girls who saw Bambi, and that put an end to that. But we're not trying to take away guns. We just want responsible use of guns the way they're intended to be for sport or for hunting.
All right, Congresswoman, we appreciate you joining us today. That is Democratic Representative Dina Titus of the 1st District of Nevada. Her district, of course, Joe, including the Las Vegas Strip, where we saw those events take place in October of 2017. Perhaps not a surprising ruling from the Supreme Court we got today with the 6-3 decision. The Congresswoman herself said that she expected it, and yet one that certainly is getting a lot of attention here in Washington.
2 weeks of opinions left. We've got a lot more and some big ones, too, including presidential immunity, Kailey, that we'll be talking about before the end of this month. This is the fastest show in politics, Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Welcome to Balance of Power, the Friday edition. I'm Joe Mathieu in sweltering Washington, and glad you're with us on the radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube, where you can watch us right now. We're on YouTube and easy to find. Search Bloomberg Global News. You'll find our live stream there that goes straight through the day from our studios in Washington and New York as we assemble our panel with the billboards going up in Milwaukee. We saw this coming. Maybe the T-shirts, the hats, I don't know. Do they have the koozies made yet? The billboards are out, though, after Donald Trump described the city in the key swing state where his convention will be held next month as horrible. That would be Milwaukee. The DNC is now launching billboards in 10 locations across beautiful Milwaukee, featuring the former president's insults of the city that, again, will be home to the RNC next month. Rick Davis is with us this day after Seersucker Thursday, Bloomberg Politics contributor, and Jeanne Zaino is back in the mix as well. Great to see you both. Welcome to our panelists on this Friday. Jeanne, I know it's silly season here, but is this the strategy the DNC wants to be pursuing for the next 6 months?
And I'm sorry I missed Seersucker Thursday.
It was cool.
So much about yesterday was just a reminder of the craziness that Donald Trump brings. Everything from him and Nancy Pelosi potentially being together to Hannibal Lecter to Taylor Swift. I mean, this is what the man is talking about. His first time back in the Capitol complex since January 6th. And of course, the Milwaukee is horrible, rings large. We saw the cover of the Milwaukee Sentinel Journal today.
Yeah.
I suppose it's not the first time we have heard a candidate or a presumptive nominee say something bad about a swing state or a swing city. But yeah, the Democrats are going to ride it for all it's worth. It's all we'll see when we go to Milwaukee. So it should be a lot of fun.
Can't wait. The front page of the Journal Sentinel. Rick, I'm looking at it now on my terminal. Trump, this big bold headline, Trump, Milwaukee, horrible. Now, to be fair, the Trump campaign tried to clarify his remarks and say he was talking about crime in the city. He wasn't trying to insult the city. But Rick, you've run conventions before. Is this the right way to roll into Milwaukee?
Yeah, it's kind of tough on the host committee, who's out there raising tens of millions of dollars to support the Republican National Convention. When your nominee, who you're going to basically spend all this money celebrating, thinks you've got a horrible city. But I think there's even bigger things at stake here. I mean, as you mentioned, this is a battleground state. Every poll we've seen in the last 6 months has basically called this thing dead even. And just as a reminder, Biden only won this by 20,000 votes in 2020. So this is one of the key states. Biden has to win this state, we think, in order to win the presidency. And Trump gives them a gift like this. I mean, they can explain all day long what they want, but these billboards are going to remind people that he called our city horrible. I mean, spinach is horrible. How can a city be horrible? I mean, like, that's such over the top.
All right, so this is too good. Producer James answers the call. The Biden-Harris campaign is already up with "Not a Horrible City" T-shirt. You've got the map of the state here. $32, by the way, and the koozies are in. Look at this. I love Milwaukee koozies with the mug of beer. Jeanne, I guess we've already answered the question. This is how you respond if you're the DNC.
Oh, it is. And I want to tell Rick, Popeye is not going to be happy. Spinach is not horrible. It's very healthy and very good, as is Milwaukee, a beautiful city. But it was comical to hear the Republicans come out of this meeting, and every Wisconsin Republican was saying, well, he didn't say it. Well, he said it, but he was talking about crime. Or, it was this back and forth, as if he was your crazy grandpa at Thanksgiving dinner who just was tired and drank too much and was just, going on, and they were held responsible for what he was saying. And of course, the reality is that this is what we are going to be faced with for the next rest of this campaign, and if he wins, for the next 5 years. And this is a gift to the Democrats, not just this statement in Milwaukee, but the fact that Trump is back, and Trump is back being Trump. And while this gets his base ginned up and people laugh, there are a big coalition of people who are saying, the man goes back to Capitol Hill and talks about Hannibal Lecter not being so bad because he invited a friend. I don't even know what that means beyond the, it's reminiscent of the sharks in Arizona the other day. This is what we're in store for. Do we really want to turn over the nuclear codes to him? And that is a big problem for Republicans in the Trump campaign. So Democrats say, go at it. Keep talking, Donald, because it's not good. He was better off Twitter in his contained bubble of, social media where nobody sort of paid attention to every little thing he was saying. But he's back now.
Wow. Oh, my God. 5 of the 10 billboards will feature Donald Trump's remarks in full. Quote, Milwaukee, where we're having our convention, is a horrible city, unquote. The other 5 billboards will include the tweet from Jake Sherman at Punch Bowl with the siren, including that same line. I don't know. Get your koozies and T-shirts now. All I know, Rick, is there's a debate coming. And this is serious business. We can fool around with T-shirts and koozies all day, but the clock is ticking here. And Joe Biden is going to be in 3 different time zones over the course of this 2-week period. He was in France last week. He's in Italy today. He's got to get on a red eye. Well, I guess that's on Air Force One. Fly overnight to California for the big fundraiser with George Clooney this weekend. He's on other stuff next week. Would you need to take the president in this case or your candidate aside and say, sir, it's time to start preparing for the debate?
Yeah, this is really troubling, the schedule that they're putting Joe Biden in. And I'd say even beyond the debate, just his own ability to perform at a high level is really being, I think, put in danger. I mean, 2 trips to Europe in a month. Back and forth. Why wouldn't you just stay over there, do a little gardening in somebody's place in Germany and hang out for a while and recover from one big event to another? And now they're going to put him on a whirlwind, back and forth across the country in order to get him ready for a debate. I really think, I've now been through debates since Ronald Reagan's 1980 debate and virtually every Republican president since then. And the one thing you've got to do is be rested. You have to be fresh. You have to be able to sit and think. And usually that goes along with a pretty aggressive debate prep sessions that have to be built into the schedule. And incumbent presidents always made the mistake. Oh, every day on my job is debate prep. That's bunk. It's not debate prep. You're doing your day job. And usually the president in power for the first term has a horrible first debate. And we can go through them all. I mean, they're like legendary, and I've cried through every one of them.
How
and
true.
and so, like, I think these guys have to wake up in the White House and realize that their candidate's going to be tired and he's not going to be prepared, and they should not expect him to do well. And the whole idea was this wild card debate that he had to do well in.
Mm-hmm. Jeannie, it's less than 2 weeks away. Are you getting nervous here? I mean, this would be a lot to ask for a 20-year-old to be doing all of this travel right now. I realize they've set aside some time at Camp David, I guess in that week before the debate. Is that enough?
You know, the reality is that Joe Biden has debated Donald Trump before. He's prepped for 2 debates with him. So there is that reality. It is curious to me because, of course, Biden's camp chose this time. They knew there was going to be a G7. They knew there was going to be the Normandy. Those are both important. They have this fundraiser this weekend. So they chose this. You know, what we can say is expectations of Joe Biden couldn't be lower. I mean, if he comes out and is mildly conscious and able to, you know, say basic things, I think it's going to be a win at this point. But you look at the other side. You have Jason Miller out there saying, Donald Trump doesn't need any prep. He's not going to need to be programmed by staff. He's going to demonstrate elite stamina like he does in the rallies. I mean, they are going on and on about how Donald Trump has this thing wrapped up. No prep, you know, expectations will be beat. And so, you know, I think the other side of this is going to be fascinating as well, considering we basically are looking at an incumbent on incumbent debate. And so I'm not sure Donald Trump is any more prepared for this than Joe Biden is. And last time around, Donald Trump was very, very off his rocker, and Joe Biden had a pretty good performance. And I don't know that won the election for him, but it certainly helped him in the polls.
Elite stamina. I think I saw that stuff at 7-Eleven. Rick, is this a traditional murder board, as you guys call it? Do you put the incumbent in a room at a podium and somebody else is playing Donald Trump, or is Joe Biden beyond that?
Nobody's beyond that. And if Joe Biden thinks he is beyond it, or that by debating Donald Trump twice and arguably winning because Donald Trump lost, it somehow prepares him for this, it's all nuts. These are all circumstantial. Everything has changed since 2020. And if he doesn't think so, look at his approval rating. You know, he's at 39 to 40%. And he was at 54% in 2020. Joe Biden doesn't have anything to give back to the field. And so, yeah, I mean, why in the world would you not have somebody who's going to perform the antics that Donald Trump will perform on the debate stage, standing next to Biden? And the thing you have to worry about Joe Biden right now, because we've seen the quick temper lately, is him losing his cool. You know, Donald Trump, I'm sure, is going to get up there and try and get the guy to go after him and talk about non-presidential, talk about outside your comfort zone. Last thing you want is Dark Brandon showing up on the stage.
Well, what's he going to have to do, a triple gainer when he comes out here to prove to everybody that he's not too old for this, Jeannie? I mean, I wonder where the bar is for both of them. Donald Trump is suggesting they be drug tested because he thinks they gave Joe Biden something for the State of the Union. And I do wonder, what does Joe Biden do if Donald Trump, to Rick's point, pulls, you know, a classic? What if he shows up a half an hour late just to psych him out?
He could do anything. It's Donald Trump. I'm still wondering if he shows up at all, given that there's no audience. But, you know, we'll have to see. But, you know, for Joe Biden, he does know how to handle this. Does he need debate prep? Absolutely. Does he need rest? Absolutely. I think a week is enough. But, you know, we'll have to see. But don't forget, Donald Trump also has to perform, right? This is not all about Joe Biden. And Donald Trump has to perform. And he can't perform the way he did, quite frankly, yesterday in the House, talking about Taylor Swift, Hannibal Lecter, Nancy Pelosi, and him being a good item. I mean, this is craziness. And if that is the Trump that shows up, that is more of a problem, I think, than Joe Biden having less, you know, stamina than people might imagine. The bar is low for Joe Biden. People don't hate him. They don't think he's crazy. They just think he's old, and he is old. Donald Trump, they think, is crazy and potentially dangerous. So he can't bring that Donald Trump to the show.
Wow, I don't even know what to say. She's not a Hannibal Lecter fan. Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
It is the Friday edition. Welcome to the threshold of the weekend as Joe Biden wraps things up at the G7 in Italy a bit later on today. This is the last big day of the confab before he comes back to Washington, knowing that there's been a lot of discussion not only about Ukraine, and we spent a lot of time on this yesterday, this new security deal between the U.S. and Ukraine. We brought you Joe Biden's bilateral news conference with President Zelensky. But of course, Israel came up. I believe it was our own Josh Wingrove who went there asking for an update on a ceasefire, and we didn't get too much of an answer on that, with news today that things are not cooling off in Israel. The New York Times reporting on this, and it's pretty heavy duty, with strikes increasing in southern Gaza and now new attacks against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And we've been talking about the potential for a new front to the north, if we can't already call it that. And not the first time that we've discussed this with Michael Allen, who joins us now, I'm glad to say, on our Friday edition. Managing Director, partner at Beacon Global Strategies. He spent time as Special Assistant to the President, Senior Director for Counterproliferation Strategy, just the voice that we want now. It's great to see you. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Are we going to have a second war in Israel? We've been waiting for something to break here with Hezbollah, and it sure feels like we're close.
I think we are. I was there a month ago, and across the political spectrum in Israel, they say, our psyche, the way we are post-October 7th, and even after Iran took direct shots at us, we can no longer rely solely on our military deterrent. We have to look at the capability of our adversaries and then make a judgment of whether we can live with that. And Israel cannot live with another genocidal terrorist organization just over their border. They're a small country. They can't forever have an evacuated space where no one is. Honestly, Israel's almost been at war for the last 8 months with Hezbollah. They hit them all the time.
They do.
Senior leaders constantly. But I do think it's going to become a hotter war as
Something
Gaza finishes.
The skirmishes or the shelling across the border that we've seen. What does that mean then? Because it's not the first time that you've warned us about this.
Yeah.
What does that mean for a potential ceasefire with Hamas? You can't have both, can you?
I don't think you can have both. The Israelis, by the way, don't want a two-front war. I think they would rather wrap up, let's call it, major combat operations in Rafah and in Gaza. They'll always be there forevermore, I think, in some limited fashion. I think they want to get that done. They want to move forward. President Biden and his administration are unalterably opposed to Israel declaring war on Hezbollah. So we're at loggerheads again with Israel about what the right thing for them to do is.
So Joe Biden can take that ceasefire proposal, fold it up, and put it back in the drawer for now, it sounds like.
Well, also Hamas is just saying no all the time. Now, we can debate whether Biden has been too anti-Israel, so Hamas is hanging back and saying, I'm going to get more of what I want if I just wait, because the world, including Israel's best friend, the United States, isn't standing with them. But also Hamas put forward 12 to 15 other things that they wanted out of a ceasefire deal, and I think most of them were total non-starters.
Well, was the trap this idea of a permanent ceasefire? Why not just deal with phase one? 6 weeks. Because Hamas says it's not signing anything unless it's permanent, and Israel says it won't be permanent until the elimination of Hamas. So what are we doing?
The only leverage I think Hamas has is the hostages. And the more that they let go or the more that get rescued, I think they lose leverage. And the only thing they want is a complete cessation of hostilities. And they can read the newspapers. Netanyahu says, well, no matter what we put forward in this agreement, we're not going to be able to give up going after Hamas if there's still a military force there. So I think at the end of the day, that's what Sinwar's calculation is, which is I can't get everything I want, so I'm not going to even start this process.
As we spend time with Michael Allen at Beacon Global Strategies in the throes of a dangerous world and a dangerous Middle East, imagine Israel declares war against Hezbollah. What happens to U.S.-Iranian relations, if I can even use that term?
So I think the United States should try to get a little tougher on Iran. They are making...
In what form?
Well, sanctions, or at least to enforce the sanctions that are already on the books that we're not currently implementing or otherwise enforcing. I think that they have to look to the head of the snake. It's Iran. They need to put pressure on them rather than always putting only pressure on Israel to curb its hostilities. There's got to be both sides of the equation if they want to have success.
Well, boy, that's something. And you wonder what Antony Blinken thinks about that as he continues shuttle diplomacy, coming off his 8th trip now.
Yeah.
These have not been terribly effective.
They haven't. There is actually there is a diplomatic path in Lebanon. It's a guy named Amos Hochstein. He has been requested by the people in Lebanon to come over to try and broker some sort of deal.
This is a senior advisor to President Biden. He's joined us on this program before and helped to shepherd the energy policy at the White House. This is about relationships, is your point.
Exactly. They've asked him to see if he can figure out a way to get Hezbollah to withdraw north of the Litani River. That would give Israel more confidence, at least, that the terrorist organization isn't going to run over in the middle of the night and massacre everyone.
That's fascinating. So we go from Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, to a presidential advisor as being able to turn the key to some diplomatic solution, not the Secretary of State.
He Amos Hochstein needs some backing, though. He can't just solve this diplomatically all on his own. He needs some leverage, and I think that means they have to go through Tehran and not just Tel Aviv.
Does that happen?
It's hard to see because I think
where's that meeting take place?
Well, if you believe this Wall Street Journal article from about 10 days ago, the administration understandably doesn't want any more problems in the Middle East before the election, doesn't want a regional escalation scenario, and they asked the Europeans, according to the Wall Street Journal, to not punish Iran for their new nuclear transgressions. So I don't know that the administration is conditioned in this way to think, let's put more pressure on Iran. But I know it's not going to work when I go to Israel and I talk to everyone there, and everyone across the political spectrum says we've got to do something about Hezbollah before September 1st. Kids need to move back into their communities, get back to school, and get life back to normal.
Boy, it does feel like we're on the verge of something. Lastly, after what we heard from Joe Biden yesterday, speaking, I think, specifically to Patriot missile systems, but maybe consider this even more broadly, with our commitment to Ukraine. Does that slow weapons deliveries to Israel? He made it clear that we will fulfill our obligations to Ukraine before anything goes anywhere else.
So you have to go weapon system by weapon system. And I think that we have a great relationship with the Israelis on Iron Dome.
Iron Dome goes
Arrow and the rest. And so uninterrupted. We're working on that jointly. Patriots, though, are in demand all over the globe, and we're trying to get a bunch of Europeans like the Spanish or the Greeks to say, hey, you know what, maybe we don't need these so badly, and we ought to transfer them to the Ukrainians.
Well, we also try to increase manufacturing capacity on these missiles, right?
That's hard to do.
Project.
I'm glad the NDAA just passed. We need to rebuild the defense industrial base.
Well, we'll see what Raytheon can do about that. I know that they're expanding down south as well. Beacon Global Strategies, Michael Allen, what a treat. It's good to see you. Safe travels until we see you again. He's just about always about to get on an airplane when we talk to him. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. Thanks for being with us here on the Friday edition of Balance of Power as we turn our attention to Capitol Hill. What a day that was yesterday, with Donald Trump making his return to the Capitol for the first time since the January 6th attacks on the Capitol. Spent time with lawmakers. He was feted by the House and the Senate, Republican lawmakers, and then spoke to the business community at the Business Roundtable. We walked you through all of his movements yesterday across town, and Zach Cohen joins us now with the view from the Capitol, Bloomberg Government Congress reporter. Zach, it's good to see you. I wonder just the broader impact of what we saw yesterday, shaking hands with Mitch McConnell. He even got Mitt Romney in the room here. So it does seem that the establishment on Capitol Hill is all behind Trump now. Is that official?
It does seem like the majority of both House and Senate Republicans, with a few notable exceptions, attended these meetings that were just off of the Capitol building and party offices on Capitol Hill. And Trump was really feted, it sounds like, in both situations. You know, they wished him happy birthday, which I believe is today, and certainly no lack of unity among these two parties, or excuse me, among the party as they head into the November elections, where both the White House as well as Congress, both chambers, will be hotly contested. And so you had people like Senator Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, more moderate members who actually voted to convict Trump in his impeachment trial after the January 6th insurrection, opt not to attend. Romney himself initially thought he wasn't going to make it, but his flight to Palm Beach was canceled, he told a few of us, and so did end up going as well. So a good indication that Republicans are trying to rally around the flag here, despite the federal convictions, despite the attempts to overthrow the election, and despite, in some states, the really difficult politics with Trump at the top of the ticket.
Yeah, he's 78 years old today, huh? So the former president got a big birthday bash here in Washington. Happy Flag Day, by the way, Zach. I haven't said that to anyone yet. You're writing about some of the folks we saw gather around the president when he spoke yesterday. I mean, he had half the Republican Senate behind him at the NRSC standing at the podium. None beaming more, I would argue, than J.D. Vance. But as you write, Senator Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, Tim Scott, all praised by Donald Trump yesterday, all three competing to be his vice presidential candidate, his running mate in this race. And Zach, if it's any of these three, his choice is going to have an interesting downstream effect on the Senate, which is something you're writing about today. What should we be bracing for?
Right. And in that meeting, I have heard from some sources that make of this what you will, that Trump ended up praising Tim Scott, the Republican from South Carolina, a little more effusively than Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, who are two other Republican senators who are in contention for the vice presidential nomination. Trump has said that he plans to make that announcement just in time for Milwaukee, when the Republicans meet there to formally nominate him as their pick for president. And so we got a little bit of color there. But I've been thinking more ahead to next January. If, in fact, one of these 3 or 4 senators that are in contention becomes the next vice president, that would create not just an opening in their Senate seat, but potentially openings in Senate leadership. Tim Scott, for instance, is currently the ranking member on the banking committee with jurisdiction over Wall Street and the financial industry more broadly. And if he ends up going to the White House, then Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota, which holds billions of dollars in trusts, he would take over potentially that chairmanship of the committee if Republicans do flip the majority. And so you could see a lot of turnover, not just in the White House, but in the Senate, depending on who this pick is.
That's pretty remarkable. I love the Marco Rubio geography issue here, by the way. Is this real? Somebody's got to move, right? Either Donald Trump, if he chose Marco Rubio, would have to make his permanent address back in New York, and I guess he could do that pretty easily, certainly on paper. But Marco Rubio has even suggested he might move out of Florida, or would be willing to be Donald Trump's running mate. Which is more likely?
I mean, unclear at this point, but yes, there is this constitutional requirement that both the president and the vice president on a national ticket can't be from the same state, and they can't contest the votes in that state if they are not. And I can't imagine Republicans would give up the opportunity to win Florida's electoral college votes, given how far the state has swung in their direction in recent elections. There's actually some precedent on this. Someone reminded me earlier today that when then Governor George Bush of Texas chose Dick Cheney as his running mate, Cheney moved his official residence from Texas back to Wyoming so that they would not conflict with that constitutional prerogative. And so I do think the residential issue is one that they would have to figure out if Rubio, who is a telegenic rising star in the party for sure, a former presidential candidate in his own right, if Trump were to pick him. But Tim Scott, Tom Cotton from Arkansas is in the mix. Doug Burgum, we hear a lot about, the North Dakota governor. So certainly it's not a done deal yet. And I think the residency issue for Rubio is one they have to consider.
This is a big question about Senate leadership, which you've already referred to. Interesting to see Donald Trump with Mitch McConnell. They're not friends. Donald Trump has repeatedly insulted his wife, and it was the first time that we saw these two together since January 6th. But boy, it was all smiles. Same, of course, for John Cornyn, who wants to have the job. John Thune wants to have the job. Will Donald Trump essentially call this, if he wins re-election, who the next Senate leader will be?
When McConnell steps down in November, certainly a lot of Republican senators are going to be wondering if Trump makes an endorsement in that race, which he hasn't yet. That would certainly sway a lot of their decision making. Now, a lot of the jockeying has already happened behind the scenes. You've got some senators that have already pledged, either publicly or privately, to either, as you mentioned, John Cornyn from Texas, a former party chairman, a former whip, John Thune from South Dakota. There's another South Dakota senator for you. A number of pledged their support to him, is what I've been told. And then there's Rick Scott from Florida, who is clearly angling for a Trump endorsement. He actually told me in Florida just a couple of weeks ago that he's hoping Trump gets involved, but hasn't predicted that would essentially be the case. Trump certainly has a lot of influence on this party and among this conference. But at the end of the day, this is an election that's decided behind closed doors on a secret ballot. And so it's really hard to whip for anybody. And while Trump's influence is certainly present here, I'm not sure it's determinative.
Always a treat to talk to Zach Cohen, our Friday treat today from Bloomberg Government. Zach, it's great to see you. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.